Okay, so it's academic job hunting season.
Yeah, it
And
is.
I gotta say, from the outside looking at academia, it can feel like a whole other world sometimes,
Because it
right?
really does have its own unique rhythms and culture. I think that's for sure.
Like it has its own secret handshake or something.
Yeah.
But luckily for us, we don't need a secret decoder ring
No.
to navigate this world today.
We have a great article here written by someone with a ton of experience in the field, and it's all about faculty job interviews.
Perfect.
They've been on all sides of this process, as the candidate on search committees, as a hiring manager.
Yeah.
So their advice is going to be really useful for anyone going through this process.
Okay, I am so ready for this. I find this whole world so fascinating, and I'm sure our listeners do too.
Yeah.
Maybe they're prepping for interviews right now, or maybe they're just curious about how it all works.
Right.
But either way, let's dive in.
So one of the most interesting things that this author points out is that the interview isn't just about you proving yourself to the institution.
Okay.
It's about you deciding if they're the right fit for you.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
It totally flips the script, right? It's like you're both trying to impress each other in a way.
Exactly.
Okay, so what's the first tip that stood out to you?
Well, the first thing they talk about is really understanding your audience.
Oh, okay.
The search committee.
The search committee, right?
And it's not enough to just glance at their CVs.
Oh, yeah. You got to do your homework.
You need to do some real digging.
I've definitely been in those interviews where I'm like, wait, who are all these people again?
So the article mentions using resources like Web of Science.
Mm-hmm.
Any advice on how to go beyond just a basic search and really get to know the committee's work?
I think it helps if you think of it like meeting with a potential collaborator.
Okay.
You wouldn't go into that meeting without reading at least some of their recent publications, would you?
No, not at all.
So the same principle applies here.
Okay.
Look beyond just their job titles.
Yeah.
See what they're actually passionate about.
What journals are they publishing in? What are their most cited papers? Are there any common threads or themes that are running through their research?
Right. You want to show that you've done your homework and that you're genuinely interested in their work.
Exactly.
Not just trying to impress them, but actually engaging with their ideas.
Yes. And don't underestimate the power of going a little deeper.
Oh, okay.
Maybe you find a paper they co-authored years ago that connects to your research in a surprising way.
Yeah.
Those little details can really make you stand out.
That reminds me of this time I was at a conference, and I met this professor whose work I really admired. Yeah. And I'd actually dug up this obscure paper.
Oh, wow.
They had written ages ago, and I managed to work a reference to it into our conversation.
That's great.
And they were so surprised and delighted.
Of course.
It definitely sparked a more interesting discussion.
Yeah.
So have you had any similar experiences where a candidate's research really impressed you like that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I had a candidate once who had clearly read my work. Oh, wow.
Not just skimmed it.
Mm-hmm.
And they were able to draw these really insightful connections between their research and mine.
Oh, nice.
Even suggesting some potential areas for collaboration.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was clear they weren't just name dropping. They genuinely understood my work and how it intersected with their own interests, and it made a huge impression.
Yeah, it makes such a difference when you can tell someone has actually engaged with your work, right?
Absolutely.
It shows you're not just going through the motions, but that you're genuinely invested in the opportunity and the people you might be working with.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about researching the committee.
Yeah.
What's the next gem of wisdom from this article?
This one's all about decoding the faculty handbook.
Okay, the faculty handbook.
Sounds a bit like a Dan Brown novel, I know.
A little bit.
But the article makes a really interesting point that this document can actually be a goldmine of information about the institution's culture and values.
Oh, interesting. Okay, so
Yeah.
what kind of clues are we looking for here? We'll think of it as getting a behind-the-scenes look at how the institution operates.
Okay.
You'll find things like tenure policies,
Mm-hmm.
how they handle adjunct faculty,
Okay.
sabbatical frequency,
Right.
even their retirement plans.
Okay.
All of these details reveal a lot about the institution's priorities and how they treat their faculty.
That's such a good point.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of the opportunity and forget to look at the bigger picture.
Really?
So what are some specific red flags to watch out for in the faculty handbook?
Well, the article specifically mentions institutions with a heavy reliance on adjunct faculty.
Okay.
Now, it's not that adjunct positions are inherently bad, of course.
Right.
They serve a very important role.
Yeah.
But a large adjunct population can sometimes be a sign of deeper issues.
Deeper issues like what? Help me unpack this a little.
Sure.
Because I think this is something a lot of people outside academia might not understand.
Yeah, so a heavy reliance on adjunct faculty can sometimes indicate a lack of investment in faculty development. And there might be some potential issues with equitable treatment.
Okay.
It can create this situation where there's sort of like a two-tiered system
Yeah.
with the tenured faculty having more job security,
Mhm.
better pay,
Right.
and more opportunities for advancement,
Yeah.
while the adjuncts are often left with less stability and fewer resources.
Right.
And that imbalance can have a ripple effect.
Yeah.
It impacts faculty morale, but also the quality of education for the students.
Wow. I hadn't thought about it that way. It's
Yeah.
like you have to look beyond the shiny brochures and see how the institution actually treats its people.
Exactly.
It makes you realize that finding the right fit is about so much more than just the job title or the research opportunities.
Yes,
It's about aligning your values with the institution's values.
absolutely.
Okay, so we've decoded the faculty handbook,
Hi.
and hopefully we haven't encountered any major red flags.
Right.
What's next on the agenda?
Okay, so this one is fun. It's about crafting your one-liner.
You're the one.
Yeah, basically they suggest coming up with a memorable phrase
Okay.
that kind of encapsulates your unique contribution to the field.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, it's like a tagline for your academic persona.
Yeah, like an elevator pitch for academics.
Exactly. The
Uh-huh.
article gives examples like Mars mission or futurist.
Those are good.
Yeah,
So what do you think about this approach? Is it a gimmick or can it actually be effective?
I think it can be really powerful,
Okay.
but it has to be done authentically.
Right.
The key is to find a phrase that genuinely reflects your passions and your expertise,
Right.
not just something that sounds catchy or trendy.
Right.
Otherwise, it'll come across as forced or insincere.
Yeah, I agree. My own attempt at a one-liner.
Oh.
Let's just say it didn't exactly take off.
Oh, no.
So any tips on finding that sweet spot between memorable and authentic?
Okay, we'll start by thinking about your core strengths.
Okay.
What sets you apart from other researchers in your field?
Right.
What are you most passionate about? What's the one thing you want people to remember about your work?
Yeah.
And once you've identified those key elements, try to distill them into a concise and impactful phrase.
Oh.
And don't be afraid to play around with different options until you find something that feels both true to yourself
Yeah.
and memorable to others.
Okay, I might have to revisit my one-liner after this.
Good.
Okay, so we've talked about knowing our audience,
Mm-hmm.
decoding the faculty handbook,
Yes.
and crafting a killer one-liner.
Yes.
What's next?
Okay, so now it's time to get down to the nitty-gritty research funding.
Okay, research funding.
Even if you haven't secured any major grants yet,
Right.
the article stresses the importance of demonstrating your knowledge of funding opportunities
Right.
and how your work aligns with potential funders' priorities.
This makes total sense because search committees want to know that you're not just a brilliant researcher,
Mm-hmm.
but also someone who can bring in the resources to support your work
Right.
and contribute to the institution's overall research profile. So how can we do this effectively, especially if you're early career researchers who are still building our grant writing skills?
Well, one way is to do your homework on specific grant programs that align with your research interests.
Okay.
Familiarize yourself with their guidelines, deadlines, and funding priorities.
Right.
And then during the interview, you can weave in specific examples of how your work could be a good fit for those programs.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, it shows initiative and strategic thinking.
Yeah, it's about demonstrating that you're not just waiting for funding to fall into your lap.
Right.
You're actively seeking out opportunities and thinking strategically about how to secure resources to advance your research.
Exactly.
Now, this might be a bit of a delicate question,
Okay.
but I'm curious, would it be appropriate to inquire about submitting grant proposals before officially starting the job?
Oh, that's an interesting question.
Or is that like too presumptuous?
Yeah, it's definitely a topic that requires some finesse.
Okay.
You don't want to come across as overly eager or as if you're assuming you've already got the job.
Right.
But you can certainly express your interest in understanding the institution's policies on pre-appointment grant submissions.
Okay.
You could frame it as a hypothetical question.
Okay.
Like, if I were to be offered this position, what would be the process for submitting grant proposals before my official start date?
Ooh, subtle but effective.
Yeah.
It shows that you're thinking ahead
Yeah.
and eager to hit the ground running,
Yeah.
but in a respectful and professional way.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered research funding,
Yes.
What's the next piece of the puzzle in this academic job search deep dive?
All right, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the teaching side of things.
Okay.
The article reminds us to be mindful of the teaching load,
Yeah.
class sizes,
Hmm.
and enrollment trends within the department.
This is so important. It's
Yeah.
easy to get caught up in the research aspects of a faculty position,
Yeah.
but teaching is a huge part of the job, and it's crucial to understand the expectations and resources available.
Yes.
So what kind of questions should we be asking to get a better sense of the teaching environment?
Well, you want to get a clear understanding of the teaching load first.
Okay.
Like how many courses you'd be expected to teach each semester,
Right.
typical class sizes,
Mm-hmm.
the types of courses you might be assigned.
Okay.
You can also ask about teaching resources like teaching assistants,
Right.
instructional technology support, and professional development opportunities for faculty.
Mm.
And don't be afraid to ask about enrollment trends,
Oh, yeah?
especially if you're interested in a specific field or area of study,
Right.
because declining enrollment in a particular major, for example,
Yeah.
that might raise some questions.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's about assessing not just the immediate teaching responsibilities,
Mm-hmm.
but also the long-term viability and health of the department.
Yes.
Now, I want to touch on something that could be a bit tricky to navigate.
Okay.
Departmental budgets. How do we approach potentially sensitive topics like this without seeming intrusive or overly focused on the financial aspects of the job?
Yeah, you're right. It's a delicate balance.
Right.
You don't want to come across as if you're only interested in the money.
Right.
But it is perfectly reasonable to want to understand the department's financial model
Mm-hmm.
and how they allocate resources.
Okay.
Keep your questions general,
Okay.
focusing on things like the department's overall funding sources and their priorities for spending.
Okay.
So you can ask things like, how does the department prioritize funding for research and teaching?
Okay.
Or what are some of the department's current initiatives and how are they being funded?
Gotcha. So save the more specific budget inquiries for later stages in the hiring process.
Exactly.
Like maybe when you're meeting with the dean or the department head.
Yeah, that's the right time.
Okay, that's great advice. It's about striking the right balance between showing that you're financially savvy
Mm-hmm.
and genuinely interested in the department's well-being,
Yeah.
without coming across as overly concerned with the bottom line.
Right.
Okay, so we've covered research, teaching, and finances.
Yeah.
What other pearls of wisdom does this article have for us?
Okay, so the next section focuses on the importance of what the author calls equanimity.
Equanimity.
Yeah, basically maintaining emotional maturity and professionalism throughout the interview process.
Oh, this is so crucial.
Yeah.
Job interviews can be so stressful,
Oh, they are.
and it's easy to let your nerves get the best of you.
Absolutely.
But it's important to remember that the search committee isn't just evaluating your qualifications.
Mm-hmm.
They're also assessing your personality and how you'd fit into the department's culture.
Exactly.
So how do we strike that balance between being authentic and letting our personality shine through while also maintaining that sense of professionalism and composure?
It's about being mindful of your body language,
Okay.
tone of voice, and the overall impression you're projecting.
Right.
Be enthusiastic and engaged, of course,
Hmm.
but avoid coming across as desperate or overly eager. Right.
Maintain eye contact.
Yeah.
Listen attentively and respond thoughtfully to questions.
Right.
And most importantly, be respectful of everyone you interact with,
Yeah.
from the administrative staff to the faculty members on the search committee.
It's like that old saying, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar, right?
Exactly.
But how do we address potential concerns or challenges we see within the department without sounding negative or overly critical?
You're right. It's a fine line to walk.
Right.
The key is to frame your concerns as thoughtful questions
Okay.
rather than complaints or criticisms.
Okay.
So, for example, instead of saying, I heard your department is a toxic mess,
Right.
you could ask,
Yeah.
what are some of the department's current challenges and how are you working to address them?
Oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
It shows that you're perceptive and engaged, but
Mhm.
also solution-oriented and committed to working collaboratively to improve things.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about emotional intelligence and navigating potentially tricky questions.
What's next on our list of interview survival tips?
All right, now we're going to tackle a topic that can be a bit awkward, but it's important to address
Yep.
personal and financial matters.
Right.
The article is very clear on this point.
Okay.
Avoid discussing salary and personal life details during the initial interview. It's
Yeah.
just not the right time or place.
Totally agree. But what if, like, a well-meaning but clueless search committee member starts asking about your family plans,
Oh, yeah.
or even worse, your salary expectations.
Right.
How do you politely redirect the conversation without seeming evasive or rude?
Well, you can gently steer the conversation back to your professional qualifications and your excitement about the opportunity.
Okay.
So, for example, if someone asks about your partner's career plans,
Mm.
you could say something like, "My focus right now is on exploring how my research aligns with the department's goals, and I'm thrilled about the potential for collaboration." Or if they inquire about your salary expectations, you could say something like, "I'm confident that we can discuss compensation once a formal offer is on the table right now. I'm most interested in learning more about the position and the department's research priorities."
Oh, that's smooth.
Yeah,
It's all about staying focused and confident and remembering that you're in control of the conversation.
exactly.
Any other tips for navigating those potentially awkward moments? Because I think we've all been there at some point in our careers.
Oh, yeah. Definitely remember that you don't have to answer any question that makes you uncomfortable.
Right.
If you encounter a particularly persistent interviewer who keeps pushing into personal territory,
Yeah.
you can always say something like, "I'd prefer to focus on the job requirements at this stage."
Okay.
Or you can politely deflect the question with a little humor, like,
Right.
"Well, that's a story for another time."
Right. Excellent points. And I think it's important to remember that the interview is a two-way street.
Absolutely.
You're also interviewing them to see if they're the right fit for you.
Ex-
So don't be afraid to ask your own questions about the department's culture,
Yes.
work-life balance, or anything else that's important to you.
Right. You're both trying to figure out if this is a good match.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about finding that mutually beneficial partnership
Hmm.
where both the candidate and the institution feel like they're getting what they need to thrive.
Absolutely.
Now, before we move on to our next set of tips,
Okay.
I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier.
Okay.
The importance of viewing each interview as a glimpse into the inner workings of academia.
Right.
What are some key things job seekers should pay attention to during those interactions
Yeah.
to get a real sense of the department's culture and whether it's a place where they can see themselves flourishing?
That's a great question. And it is something I think a lot of people overlook. It's
Mhm.
easy to get caught up in the nerves and the pressure of the interview
Right.
and forget to really observe and absorb what's going on around you. But those subtle cues and unspoken vibes can tell you so much about the department's dynamics
Mhm.
and whether it's a place where you'd feel comfortable and supported.
Yeah, it's like actions speak louder than words, right?
Exactly.
You can learn a lot about a place by simply observing how people treat each other.
Absolutely. Pay attention to the interactions between the faculty members.
Okay.
Do they seem collaborative and respectful?
Right.
Do they seem genuinely interested in each other's work?
Yeah.
How do they talk about their students?
Mm.
Are they supportive and encouraging?
Yeah.
Or do they seem dismissive or condescending?
Right.
These are all subtle clues that can reveal a lot about the department's culture and whether it's a place where you can thrive.
That's such valuable advice.
Yeah.
It's about tuning in to those unspoken vibes and trusting your intuition.
Hmm.
After all, you're not just looking for a job.
Right?
You're looking for a community where you can grow and flourish both professionally and personally.
Exactly.
And speaking of feeling supported, I want to remind our listeners that they're not alone in this journey.
Oh, that's important.
There's a whole community of academics out there who've gone through this process
Mhm.
and are more than willing to share their experiences and advice.
Aw.
So don't be afraid to reach out to your mentors,
Yeah.
former professors, or even people you've connected with at conferences.
Yes.
Most academics are happy to pay it forward and help the next generation navigate this challenging
Absolutely.
but ultimately rewarding path.
Yeah.
But for now, let's take a moment to process all of this amazing advice
Yeah. Good idea.
before we move on to the next part of our deep dive.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah. It really is all about more than just what's in the job description, isn't it?
Absolutely.
It's got to be a place where your values really align and where you can be yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
But let's circle back for a second to something a little more practical.
Okay.
This dread salary talk.
Oh, yeah, the salary talk.
The article wisely advises to stay away from talking about money in that first interview.
Right, I can see how that could send the wrong message.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it is like a major factor for most people when they're considering a job right.
Of course.
So when is the right time to talk about compensation? And how do we approach it?
I think the best time to talk about salary is once you have an offer on the table,
Okay, after you've got the offer.
that's when you're really negotiating from a place of strength.
Okay.
You have a really clear understanding of how committed the institution is to you.
Mm-hmm.
Before that point, it's really about showcasing your experience and your skills,
Right.
making sure you're a good fit for the department and for the position.
Okay, that makes sense. But once that offer, are there any tips for how to navigate that conversation?
Sure.
It always feels a little awkward to me,
Yeah.
especially in academia where we don't always talk about money very openly.
It's true. It is a little bit awkward, but the key, I think, is to be prepared. Approach that conversation with confidence and with professionalism.
Mm-hmm.
You want to do your research.
Okay.
Know the typical salary range for similar positions in your field at comparable institutions.
Okay.
There's a lot of great resources online like salary surveys and professional organizations that can give you a pretty realistic benchmark.
Right.
Don't be afraid to talk to your colleagues or your mentors for advice.
That's a great reminder. We don't have to do this alone.
No, not at all.
There's a whole community of people who've been through this and are willing to share their wisdom and advice.
Definitely right.
And speaking of wisdom, this article had one little nugget that I absolutely love.
Okay.
And it's not even directly related to the job interview itself.
Great.
It said to try to make friends during each interview,
Oh, I love that.
regardless of the outcome.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I love that advice. It really speaks to the bigger picture. I think
Yeah.
academia is a relatively small world.
Right.
And building those connections, even if you don't end up getting the job,
Mm.
can pay off in really unexpected ways down the line.
Yeah, that friendly face from an interview could end up being a future collaborator, a mentor,
Exactly.
or even someone who recommends you for another amazing opportunity that you never even knew about.
It's true.
You just never know.
Exactly. It's about fostering that sense of community and recognizing that we're all in this together.
Yeah, I like that.
And speaking of community, the article also reminds us that even if you don't get this particular job offer, it's not the end of the world.
Oh, it's a good point.
You know, there are so many incredible institutions and opportunities out there.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about finding the right fit.
Right. Easier said than done, though, right?
Oh, yeah.
Especially when you've, poured your heart and soul into an application and interview process.
Yeah.
Any advice on how to stay positive and motivated when those rejection emails start rolling in?
It's true. It can be a real roller coaster, and rejection is definitely part of the process.
Right.
But try to reframe those setbacks as learning experiences.
Okay.
What went well?
What could you have done differently?
Yeah.
Each of those interactions, even the ones that don't lead to a job offer,
Right.
help you get better.
Yeah.
You can refine your approach and become a stronger candidate.
Okay.
And honestly, sometimes it really is just a matter of timing or fit.
Yeah.
The perfect opportunity could be just around the corner.
That's a great perspective.
Yeah.
It's not about dwelling on the rejections, but
Yeah.
using them to get even better.
Right.
And who knows, maybe that no from one place leads you to an even more incredible opportunity.
Yeah.
That's an even better fit.
Yep. Exactly.
You know, speaking of finding the right fit, there's one resource that comes to mind that wasn't in the article,
Okay.
but I think it could be really helpful.
All right. What is it?
Academicjobs.com.
Oh, yeah.
Have you heard of it?
Of course, it's a great platform for finding faculty positions across a bunch of different disciplines and institutions.
Yeah. It's awesome.
I recommend it to all my students and mentees who are on the job market. It's such a valuable resource, especially for folks who are early in their careers and maybe don't have a huge network yet.
Yeah,
It's like a one-stop shop for all things academic job hunting.
it really is.
You can search by field, location, institution type.
Mm-hmm.
You can even filter by specific keywords to find things that are really aligned with your research.
It's true.
That's awesome.
And it's not just about finding jobs. They have a ton of really helpful resources, too, like articles and advice on writing your CV,
Yeah.
interview skills,
Mm-hmm.
and just navigating the academic job market in general.
Yeah, it's a great resource.
Yeah.
Highly recommend it to anyone who is even thinking about an academic career.
Yeah.
It's a good way to stay up to date on what's out there and get a sense of the landscape.
Yeah, definitely.
So speaking of that landscape, this article doesn't really get into the different types of institutions that are out there.
Right.
And I know from experience that the culture and expectations can be wildly different.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Between, say, a small liberal arts college and a large research university.
Huge difference.
Any advice on how to figure out which type of institution might be the best fit for your personality
Yeah.
and your career goals?
That's a great question, and one that I think all job seekers should be asking themselves.
Mm.
It's not just about finding a job, it's about finding the right place where you can thrive and build a whole career.
Right.
So the first step, I think, is to get clear on your own priorities and values.
Okay.
What's most important to you?
Hmm.
Do you value those close relationships with students
Right.
and a real focus on teaching?
Yeah.
Or are you more driven by the research and the opportunity to work with those cutting-edge facilities and resources?
Okay.
Once you understand your own needs,
Mm-hmm.
then you can really start researching different types of institutions
Okay.
and see what aligns with your vision.
That's great advice. It's about being intentional and thoughtful about your career path,
Yes.
rather than just like applying to every job that pops up on your screen.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to reach out to people who work at different types of places to get their insights and perspective.
Yeah.
Those informational interviews can be so valuable
Yeah, absolutely.
in helping you make a more informed decision.
Okay, so speaking of informed decisions, let's circle back to the interview process itself.
Okay.
The article talked about asking really thoughtful questions to get a better sense of the department's culture and values.
Yes.
So what are some questions that can help us get beyond that surface level?
Yeah, I think it's important to go beyond those typical questions about research and teaching. Really try to get a feel for the personality of the department.
Right.
You could ask about their approach to mentoring junior faculty. What
Okay.
kind of support do they provide? Or you could ask about the department's social culture.
Right.
Do they have regular gatherings or events outside of work?
Yeah.
You can even ask about their approach to work-life balance.
Oh, that's a good one.
Is that something that they value and support? Or is it more of a work all the time kind of environment?
Yeah, those are great questions. And I think it's important to pay attention not just to the answers themselves,
Yeah,
but to how they're delivered.
absolutely.
Do people seem enthusiastic and genuine when they're talking about the department?
Mm-hmm.
Or do they seem hesitant or evasive?
Right.
Body language and tone can tell you a lot
They can.
about the real culture of the place.
Yeah, it's about reading between the lines and trusting your gut.
Yeah, trust your gut.
If something feels off, it probably is.
Right.
If you feel this sense of energy and excitement,
Yeah,
that's a good sign that you've found the right place for you.
I love that.
Yeah.
Trust your gut. It's so important.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From the nitty-gritty of salary negotiations to the more subtle aspects of figuring out the culture.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any final words of wisdom for our listeners as they navigate this wild ride?
Yeah, I would say believe in yourself. Stay persistent and never stop learning.
Yeah.
Each interview, each interaction is just another opportunity to grow. Embrace the journey. Trust that the right opportunity is going to come along at the right time.
Love it.
And if you happen to miss out on that dream job,
Yeah.
don't despair.
Right.
Remember, you can find amazing faculty jobs on academicjobs.com.
Such a good reminder.
Yeah.
And I think it is a perfect way to remember that even if one door closes,
Mm-hmm.
there are so many others waiting to be opened.
That's true.
Yeah.
The key is to stay curious, keep exploring, and never give up on that passion for knowledge and discovery.
Well said.
Okay.
Okay, so before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
I want to touch on something that often gets overlooked in all this job search craziness.
Okay. What's that?
Yeah, it's so easy to get tunnel vision when you're in that job search mode.
It really is.
And forget that there's this whole world of possibilities within academia.
It's true.
So before we wrap up this deep dive into faculty job hunting, I think it's worth acknowledging that a faculty position isn't the only way to have a fulfilling career in higher ed.
Oh, absolutely not.
Right.
There's so many other roles where you can really contribute your skills and your passion, even if you don't land that tenure-track job.
Exactly. And those other roles might actually be a better fit for some people.
They could be.
So what are some of those other paths that people might consider?
Well, there's academic advising,
Okay, advising.
career counseling, research administration, instructional design.
Right.
There are just so many ways to make a real impact at a university or college.
Yeah, and those roles sometimes offer a different kind of work-life balance too,
They do.
which can be really appealing.
Absolutely.
It's not everyone who thrives in that high-pressure publish or perish world
You're right.
that can come with a faculty position.
Yeah, it's not for everyone.
Right. And there's no shame in choosing a path that fits your values and priorities,
Of course not.
even if it means stepping off that traditional tenure track.
Yeah, follow your own path.
So before we completely shift gears away from the faculty job search, I want to circle back for a second to something we talked about earlier.
Okay.
This idea of the interview is a window into the culture of a department.
Yes.
So any other tips on what to look for during those interactions.
Yeah, I think it's about paying attention to those subtle cues that can tell you a lot about the dynamics and values of the place.
Okay, subtle cues.
For example,
Yeah.
how do the faculty members interact with each other?
Yeah.
Do they seem collaborative and supportive,
Mm-hmm.
or is there a sense of competition or tension in the room?
Oh, yeah, you can definitely pick up on that.
Right.
Yeah,
Actions speak louder than words, as they say.
exactly. And don't be afraid to ask really direct questions about the culture.
Yeah.
What's their approach to mentoring new faculty?
Mm-hmm.
What about their commitment to diversity and inclusion?
Those are all important things.
Yeah, it's about finding a place where you feel valued and respected and supported.
Yes.
Not just professionally, but personally, too. And speaking of feeling supported,
Okay.
I want to remind our listeners that they are not alone in this.
That's so important.
There's a whole community of academics out there who've been through this process and are happy to share their experiences and their advice.
Yes.
So don't hesitate to reach out to your mentors,
Yeah.
your former professors, even people you've met at conferences.
Absolutely.
Those people are happy to pay it forward and help the next generation
Definitely.
navigate this sometimes challenging but ultimately rewarding path.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so we've come to the end of our deep dive.
We have.
Do you have any final words of wisdom for our listeners?
Yeah, I would say be bold, be authentic, and never give up on those dreams.
Oh, I love that.
This job search can be a real roller coaster,
It can.
but with perseverance and a healthy dose of self-belief, you can do it.
Yeah.
You can achieve those goals and contribute to the world of scholarship.
Love it. Okay, so everyone listening, remember the journey itself is valuable.
It is.
So embrace the challenges, celebrate the victories, and never stop learning and growing.
Well said. And hey, if this particular job doesn't work out, don't worry.
Don't worry.
You can find those top faculty positions on academicjobs.com.
So many opportunities waiting to be discovered.
There are.
So keep your head up, stay curious, and never lose sight of that passion.
That's what it's all about.
That's the perfect note to end on. Thanks so much for joining us
It was my pleasure.
on this deep dive into the world of academic job hunting.
Yes.
We hope you found it helpful and maybe even a little bit entertaining.
I hope so.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.